right, so today we're going to be learning about area and perimeter. So the first thing we need to think about is what is area? So area is the amount of squares that make up a rectangular shape. So right here we have a rectangular shape, and what we're going to do is we're going to count up these squares that make up this shape. So when I count, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So technically the area of this shape is 18. Now something to keep in mind when we are looking at area is also that because we're counting up the squares, the units would also be square units. So what does square units mean? So it can mean 18 square inches, 18 square feet, 18 square meters. But it's important for us to understand that with area, we're counting the squares that make up a rectangular shape. Therefore, our answer will always be in square units. Now, you guys are probably thinking, well, when will we ever need to know area? So area, a good way to remember area is we are thinking of ground cover. So for example, I have a backyard and I need to put more grass down because my grass has died. So I need to figure out how much grass I'm going to need to cover up a certain space. Another way to think of it is I'm laying new tile in my home. So I need to figure out how much tile I am going to need in order to cover a certain amount of space. Another way for students who may have pets at home, we are thinking I need some bedding for my pet, for my hamster, for my turtle. I need to think about how much bedding I'm going to need to lay down as the ground cover so that I'm able to purchase the right amount. We also want to think that if we're purchasing too much, then of course we're not going to be able to return that, because usually when we go to the store, like we go to Home Depot and Lowe's, they sell things based off of the square units. Or if we're cutting carpet at Home Depot or Lowe's, they aren't going to cut carpet and then we are going to take back the extra. They're not going to accept it back. So of course we want to save money. Another thing that we want to think of, instead of just ground cover, so we have 18 square units here. So instead of just thinking of ground cover, it's literally just how many squares there are. So remember, it's 18. Now, we said that this was 18 square units. We're going to look at something else. So we have this shape here. Now, this shape is another rectangular shape. We're going to count it and we're going to figure out what is the area of this shape as well. So when I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So we see that the area for this square or this rectangular shape is also 18 square units. Now remember, units could represent feet, meters, it could represent inches, centimeters, 18 square inches, 18 square meters. Now what I want us to keep in mind is this is 18 square units. This is also 18 square units. But what do we notice? Each of these shapes look different. So a key thing to also notice is sometimes shapes could look different, but they could also have the same area. Now, of course, this was a pretty easy number. But what if we had a number or a shape that looks like this? Now, if you can look closely, those are a lot of squares. It's going to take us a very long time to count up those squares. So what could we do instead? Instead of counting up each individual square, we can do something that we already are familiar with, which is multiplication. So I'm going to count up the squares on this side, and I see that this is 16 squares. And then I'm going to count up the squares here, and I can see that it is 23 squares. So let's think. I can multiply this or use my equation for area, which is length times width, to come up with the answer. So usually it kind of doesn't matter because we can turn a shape and either one could be the length, but length, a good way to think of it is how long or tall something is, and width, a good way to remember it is how long, or not how long, sorry, how wide something is. So let's go ahead, and this is where I talk to my students about how math builds upon itself. If we are multiplying these numbers, of course, we need to have a good foundation of multiplication. So let's plug it in. I know that area is equal to 16 because I'm plugging in my number for length multiplied by width, or 23. Now, I'm going to think, which way do I like to multiply? Most of my students like using area model, so we're going to have a quick little review for area model. So when we see 16, that means I have 1, 10, or 10, and I have 6 ones, or 6, okay? Now I'm going to draw out my box. Wherever my plus sign is, that's where I'm going to draw my line. Now let's think. I have 2 10s or 20, and then I have 3 1s or 3. Wherever my plus sign is, that's where I'll draw out my box. So we're going to take this 20 and we're going to multiply it by each of these numbers. I know that 20 times 10 is going to be 200. I have 2 times 1 is 2. I have 1, 2 zeros, so it's 200. Let's do the next one. 20 times 6. I know that 2 times 6 is 12. And I also have 1 0 there. So 20 times 6 is 120. We're going to go to the next. 3 times 10. I'm taking 3 and I'm multiplying by each of these numbers. 3 times 10 is 30. And next we have 3 times 6. I know that 3 times 6 is 18. Now we aren't done. We are going to add all of these numbers up. So we can add them up or we can do mental math. We know 200 plus 120 is 320 plus 30, which is 350, plus 18, which is 368. Paper's messing up. Okay. Now remember, this is area. So this is square units, okay? So if we were to actually add up all of these little squares, we should have 368 of them, okay? Now, if we have a problem or we're having a little bit of difficulty remembering multiplication, remember we can refer back to one of my other videos to talk about the different ways that we can multiply. You do not have to use area model. We can use partial products. We can use standard algorithm. Remember, my job is to teach you all of the ways. Your job is to choose which one works best for you. Look at our next video because we're going to talk about perimeter.